Well, yeah.
Go 5.5. 5.5 now.
Good evening, and thank you for coming to the commission meeting tonight. Before our meeting actually begins, we'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Poole, and we've lost several colleagues, former folks, employees, commissioners, and longtime advocates over the course of the last 2 weeks, and Commissioner Poole is going to speak to those and ask for a moment of silence.
Yes, as he stated, since the last commission meeting, we've lost three very folks who have contributed significantly to our community over the years. So if I may have a moment of silence for one, Lee Sylvaney, past city commissioner from January 1st, 1992 to December 31st, 1999. He served as the president of the city commission, 98 and 99, vice president, 1994 and 97. Ken Jensen, who's a 30-year employee of the forestry division. He did all the tree trimming and cutting for many, many years. He contributed significantly to the community. Also, and finally, Mama Jackie Collins, who served on the City Recreation Board since January 2000. Please have a moment of silence for them. Lord, thank you for the blessings you bestowed upon our city for these past few years. Please continue to do so. We ask you for the night also that you will watch over the families of those recently departed from our midst. Additionally, help guide us tonight in the city, conducting the city's business. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Lockhart?
Here.
Ms. Klein? Here. Mr. Poole?
Here.
Murray? Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Ms. Lloyd?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Here. Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of January 8th, 2018. First pleasure. Mr. Wantington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the January 8th meeting and dispense with formal reading.
Second.
Been a motion, second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. We turn first to a presentation regarding the 2017 Year in Review Economic Development Programs and Projects. And here to make that presentation is Ray Muratori, our Economic Development Specialist.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Mr. President and members of the Commission. I just want to take a few minutes to review our Economic Development Program outcomes from 2017. Specifically, I want to talk about a few of the projects and the overall allocation of the funds, and then I will finish with a brief preview of what's in store for 2018. I just want to remind everybody that the funding for this program comes from part of the increase in the admissions tax that was passed as a result of Issue 8. These funds provide dollars for both economic development programming and marketing efforts. The programming categories include substantial redevelopment, building facade and signage, and small business assistance. I apologize, you can't see some of the words in here, but I'll cover it verbally. And then just going through each of those categories, substantial redevelopment is for large-scale projects that are over $500,000, excluding acquisition. Signage and facade, here we're targeting comprehensive facade restorations and new signage. We do like to have professional renderings for this program category. And then small business assistance is really to facilitate brand new businesses and help them get open, and also to help existing businesses expand their operations in some way. Sometimes we do require the use of small business assistance programs, such as RISE, that's administered by ECADEC. I also mentioned that these economic development funds do contribute to our marketing efforts. This portion of the program is administered by our bicentennial coordinator, Mackenzie Spriggs. Some of the efforts that have been funded by these marketing dollars include videos such as the Be a Pioneer series and the State of the State video, which by itself got 125,000 views. The marketing program has also designed and created signage for both the housing and the economic development programs. It's promoted various community events and contributed to the Greetings from Sandusky mural. So just diving into the results from 2017, we committed over $600,000 in program funds. The reason that number was high was because we did have $200,000 carryover from 2016. This went toward 27 projects for 20 distinct applicants. The total project costs for which our economic development funds were used amounted to almost $11 million. So this leveraged our grant funds 18 times. Even when you exclude the private development portion of City Hall from both the numerator and the denominator in this calculation, the project investment was still over $4 million and leveraged our grant funds 15 times. I'm showing bar charts that show total project costs and our grant fund contribution relative to that, and also a pie chart that just shows, again, the total project costs and the portion that was grant funds versus private investment. So just to kind of demonstrate the program momentum relative to 2016 and also the increased private investment, I included this chart. In 2016, we committed almost $200,000 in funds. Again, that's why we had $800,000 over the 2 years for 20 projects and 16 distinct applicants. Again, showing the bar chart that shows total projects, project costs, and then our grant funds relative to that, and a pie chart that again shows total project costs and the portion that were grant funds. You can see here a larger proportion in 2016 was covered by our grant funds as projects, our funds were leveraged about 3 times. Now, giving an overview by category for both 16 and 17 of how these funds were spent. In 2016, we had no funds dedicated to the substantial redevelopment category, and that was a large chunk in 2017. Again, that was both for the private development portion of the City Hall project and also for Ohio Truck Sales large project. Signage and facade decreased in 2017 from 2016, but we still committed about $100,000 to this category. And then lastly, small business assistance increased quite a bit from 16 to 17. It was the second most popular category with over $150,000 committed. So I wanted to give another statistic with respect to the programs. A disclaimer for this slide is that these are based on estimates. These job creation numbers are based on projected increases in jobs that the applicants indicated would be created if their projects were complete. So these are estimates, but the figures for 2016 were approximately 40 jobs, and in 2017 this increased to almost 90 jobs. So again, they're estimates, but it does show that the numbers are moving in the right direction. And it also demonstrates how much in committed grant funds for each job created. So over the 2 years on average, it took about, for every $6,000 committed, 1 job was created. Now this compares to the RLF program, the revolving loan fund program that we've used historically. And that requirement for that program was that 1 job be created per $25,000 lent. So just wanted to go through some of the projects briefly. Some of these you've seen because they were large enough to bring to the commission, and some are smaller. So I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. This is Ohio Truck Sales. They did a major construction project to facilitate their relocation to George Street. It was a $1.9 million project. This is American Colors. They constructed an additional warehouse facility on Edgewater Ave, and the grant assisted with the installation of some new water lines associated with that construction. Casper Collision Center, site improvements add to their new location on Cleveland Road. And in addition to interior build-out, new signage, and facade renovations. And Derek Steiner, which is relocating to Warren Street, and their grant was for new equipment and signage. Just a few more here, warehouse properties. This is going to house CrossFit Sandusky. The grant was for exterior renovations and interior build-out. Tim Dorsey Fitness, again, interior improvements, equipment purchases, signage for their new East Market Street location. Bait House Brewery, interior build-out, equipment purchases, comprehensive facade and signage. That's a new brewery right across the street, should be open in a couple months. Zeller Gaming, which is doing business as Barra, also received funds for signage, interior build-out. That's obviously a new restaurant on Columbus Avenue. And Halo Live, which is going to be a recording studio, a listening room on Wayne Street. And they also received a grant for interior build-out. And now all of these are small, so I don't think any of these actually were presented to the City Commission. Manny's 100% Car Wash received funds for equipment to expand its service offerings. Harbor View received from grant funds for exterior repair work on the old fire station on West Market, which was formerly abandoned. Sandusky Segway, signage and equipment. Sandusky Wine Merchant, interior build-out and signage. Steinem and Hafner Insurance, exterior painting. And Haven Fund LLC, which is doing business as Shore House, received money to make some improvements on the patio. So looking ahead to 2018, approximately $450,000 will be allocated to economic development programs. This is up from $400,000 in the prior 2 years. The increase reflects increased demand, greater awareness of the programs, and continued positive momentum of the city as a whole. The projects were larger in 2017, and the programs continue to be relevant to encourage investment and facilitate appropriate returns on these investments for the applicants. We do intend to have $50,000 for marketing, which, as I said earlier, will be administered by Mackenzie Spriggs. We've already received several applications in 2018. We expect the pipeline to include projects in all categories. So that's really it. Thank you so much for your support of the program, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Muratori. Commissioners, questions or comments? You know, you've really done, hats off to you. You've taken a program that's brand new, and you've really nurtured it extraordinarily well. I've heard from several folks just about how, that I didn't know, that approached me and said, you know, the level of professional interaction and engagement just really impressed them. They did not expect that from a municipality our size, and so really have done a tremendous job representing the city. And I've also talked with two investors who told me, one I knew, one I had not known before, and said, you know, this made the difference in our coming here. We came to Sandusky because of this program. So I think that it's helping us retain good jobs here in the community, and it's helping make us a more attractive place for investment, and you can see it. So thanks for all that you're doing to make Sandusky a brighter place every day.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Poole.
also, excellent job, it's very nice. This is for 2018, is there a way that we can determine the difference between actual jobs and estimated jobs? Develop whatever you need between you and whatever you need for a process to get that, but I don't think it hinges upon or necessarily, am I expecting that they have to hit these estimates, but I do think that it's responsible for us to at least know exactly what the outcome was.
That would certainly be good to know, and I think that is something the Tax Incentive Review Committee provides us with feedback on. Does anybody remember that one offhand? I'm pretty sure that's the case. In terms of the jobs promised, the jobs created, I believe that's part of the report. We get it back from them or someone else, but
Okay.
To Mr. Poole's point, we should definitely see that information, both projected and then as it actually plays out.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, then, we have a second presentation tonight And this is one that's been long awaited, and the ability to do online bill payments with the City of Sandusky. And Mr. Soloway, I do not know the names of your guest who is here, but if you could introduce them, maybe set the table for us, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, this has been something we've been looking at for a long time, and really with Stuart Hamilton's addition to our staff, I think we've been able to really come to a good solution and find a good partner to finally roll out a online bill pay program for our utilities. So we have Chuck Lehman here from Invoice Cloud. He's going to do kind of a very high-level presentation as to what we're looking at. And then we'll be able to answer any questions and get feedback from the commission as to moving forward or not.
Okay,
So
thank
with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Hank, and Stu as well. Mayor Murray, members of the council, thank you guys for allowing me to be here tonight. My name is Chuck Lehman, and I work for Invoice Cloud. Invoice Cloud is an electronic bill presentment and payment company. We're headquartered out of Boston. And about five and a half months ago, Hank and Stuart both reached out to me to kind of look at our solution, get an idea of what our solution could do, kind of twofold. One for the citizens of Sandusky and for the city itself. And so that was their primary concern. How's it going to have a positive impact on Sandusky, and how's it going to have a positive impact on the citizens? So we started that process. Then we went through the demo. They continued to vet our system. And two other things really kind of rose to the surface. They were looking for a solution that was going to be feature-rich for the citizens of Sandusky, but it was also going to have a tight integration with your current utility billing platform, which is Software Solutions out of Ohio here. And so after doing the demos and going through it, I think they probably spent an additional 3 months looking at some other options out there and came back to us as us being probably best in class. One of those main reasons is because we're a premier partner with Software Solutions. And so what I want to do today is just kind of give you a high-level overview of our solution, how it would work for not only the citizens, but for the city of Sandusky. And if you guys have any questions, by all means, go ahead and interrupt me and we'll answer any questions that you might have. One of the big differences between our system and other platforms out there today is our system is a proactive customer engagement system. So rather than having a static site where somebody would just go and make a payment, where you expect them to go and make a payment, our system does something a little bit different. It reaches out to your citizen. It asks them for the payment. It gives them reminders for those payments. This active engagement comes through emails and it can come through text notifications. The big benefit for your customers, they're going to have multiple options for making those payments. They can make a payment through an email, through a text message, online, and there's some talk of doing a kiosk when you guys go to your new location here. One of the inherent values that our system brings to the table is that it helps to give you guys a lower delinquency rate and a higher collection level. You guys currently have about a 20% delinquency rate in your utility billing today, and I anticipate helping with our system, helping to bring that down a little bit. You're going to get a larger number of people to pay online, and it's because we're continually reaching out to your customer, asking for them to make a payment. So your customer are going to get email notifications on a regular basis, letting them know that they have a payment due. Those email notifications are gentle reminders, letting your customers know that they have a bill due. Why is that even important or relevant? Well, Fiserv did a study in 2016, and it was suggested that the vast majority of people that are fiscally responsible that actually go delinquent is simply because of one reason: they forget. And if you're not reminding your citizens to make a payment, then you're missing the boat and you're going to have a higher delinquency rate. We start our day with reminders, right? The snooze button, isn't that a simple reminder? We hit it, we expect it to go off again and remind us. So these reminders play a really important role, not only for the city of Sandusky, but for everybody in general. Your customer will be able to view a 24-month history of their invoices as well. So now today, your customer service is tasked with sending out reprints of bills to customers, when now you can send them online, give them their account number, they put in their street address, and they can print off as many as those that they like. Premier partner, again, with your billing software, Software Solutions. We've been with them for a number of years now, and they're a great partner of ours. We have a really tight integration. And what does a real integration look like? Whatever their platform does, ours mirrors as well. And that's how you can tell if somebody's got a tight integration with their platform. One of the great things that we talked about with Hank and Bo Stewart is the increased savings to Sandusky. So at the bottom there, you'll see that the customer will begin to pay for the service fee. I cover 9 states currently, and out of those 9 states, probably 85% or more of utilities and municipalities charge a convenience fee. So it's starting to become the norm rather than not the norm, I guess. So the increased savings to Sandusky is going to look like about $40,000 annually, just on that. We are PCI Level 1 compliant. This is actually a really big value for us, and it's going to be really big for your citizens as well. American Express, Amex, Discover, Visa, they're all PCI Level 1 compliant. The big difference between them and us is something that we do down there, right below there, called double data encryption. What is encryption? Encryption is taking a piece of information and making it unreadable to somebody. That somebody in our world is a hacker. With all the data breaches that we've been seeing lately with Equifax and our own NSA, it's paramount for Invoice Cloud that we have the best security measures in place, not only for the citizens of Sandusky, but for our customers nationwide. TrustWave, who does all of our auditing, suggested it was the most secure site they'd ever seen anybody could go to make a payment at. What's it mean for the council members and Stuart and Hank and I standing here today? Probably not a lot, but I'm going to argue it's going to be the most secure site that the city of Sandusky citizens can go and make a payment. Again, we're going to send out 3 email notifications every time there's a bill due. So every time a bill is sent out, each one of the citizens here is going to receive 3 emails. They'll be sent out on a specific pattern or a time frame based on what the utility billing software and your department determines the best class for when those are supposed to go out. Once the citizen makes a payment, the emails stop. So they're not going to be inundated with useless emails. But again, these are gentle reminders letting them know that they have a bill due. Again, this is how we increase the adoption rate or how many people pay online. And it also increases your collections. Your citizens will be able to make a payment on any device, whether it's a standalone computer, a laptop, a tablet, or a cell phone. 48% of all of our payments last year at Invoice Cloud, $2.9 billion worth, were made from a mobile device. That's pretty good. I venture to think that probably every one of you sitting here, if you don't have a smartphone, you're probably close to getting one. But I'd say you probably all have one. They're our own little personal computers today. We communicate with our friends, our family, our coworkers, our bosses, and they're utilized on a level that is only going to increase over the next few years. Your customer now would be able to pay through a text message. Again, keep in mind that all of this functionality integrates with your billing platform. So when the staff wants to see if somebody's made a payment, they're going to be able to go back in and see that they've made a payment. The system is mobile optimized. Different than asking your citizen to go and download an app. Downloading an app takes up space on your cell phone. Our cell phones now increasingly have so many apps on it that the memory limit is getting compromised and you have to eliminate an app, right? I'm pretty sure Hank's not going to eliminate Candy Crush. So the first app that's going to go is probably going to be the app that's used for paying the city of Sandusky. So there's no app that needs to be downloaded here. So it's mobile optimized. It's going to fit the screen to any Android device or any Apple device. Do your customers wait in line? I watched the past few times I've been here. You guys have a really busy utility billing department. And so there was some talk that when you guys, during your bicentennial year here, move over to your new location, that we talk about putting in a really nice kiosk for people that they can walk up and make a cash payment, pay by check, credit card or debit card, all of those at one place. Those would also be able to facilitate a number of different invoice types as well. Tax payments, building permits, shelter fees. So we can do that as well. This is one of the best values, and it's going to be a really big value for the city of Sandusky. So we're software as a service technology. So venture to say that a lot of you have a Facebook account. Think Facebook for a second. Facebook has about 1 billion users today. Of those billion users, they're all on the same identical version. There's no different versions of Facebook. With Invoice Cloud, there's no different versions of our platform either. We program it up in the cloud, and all 900 plus customers of ours nationwide have the same exact system. When we deploy upgrades or enhancements, all 900-plus customers get those enhancements and upgrades automatically, and you get those for free. Here's what's nice about it. We know that body styles on a vehicle change over time, right? You can tell the 2010 from a 2017, and you know it's a little bit older. Websites have the same appearance as well. It looks older. Technology gets old pretty fast as well. So as we go from 2018 to 2020, as we continue to upgrade the solution, it continues to look new. So it's as if you have a new car every single year, even though they change the body style and they change maybe the motor or the color of the paint. You still have a brand new solution. So as you guys get into 2025, 2027, your system is going to look relevant to that time frame. And you're never going to have to pay for those upgrades. This is just a list of some of the customers that we have. I wanted to throw on as many as I could for Ohio here. And so New Philadelphia is a customer. The city of Westerville around,
Mr. Lehman, are
Columbus.
you about concluded?
Yes, I
We have
am.
a lot of business tonight, and we're getting more into the detail, and I think we need to.
yep, you bet. So this is just a sampling of our customers, and that is the last slide.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners,
He's gonna come in and
Questions or
slide. Find the cracks down.
I have a few questions.
Certainly.
I want to make sure for the folks at home that they understand that they're still going to be able to receive a paper bill if that's how they prefer to receive their bill.
Yes, most certainly.
And
They
then-
have the option.
And then, could you confirm for me that the convenience fee that you referenced is the kind of convenience fee that we see when, instead of paying with a check or cash, we choose to use a credit card, that shifts to the receiving entity, in this case, the city, the fees that they have to pay, so we're just shifting those back.
That is true.
We're not charging them otherwise a convenience fee to be able to use the system. They can pay electronically if they wish.
Exactly right.
Okay. And then finally, maybe this isn't the right place or time, but I'm not sure that I want to inundate everyone who wants to use electronic bill pay with three bills or 3 emails a month. Maybe there's some data you could provide to Hank or someone else that would help us to understand why that's necessary. I don't like companies that do that. Send me one bill, that's fine. If I'm late, okay, send me another invoice or another email, but maybe we could talk about that offline.
We most certainly can.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Poole?
Just one about that. What's the sequence for these emails? Time sequence?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They're going to go out on the timeframes that Hank and the department decide. So if you guys upload your bill on the first of the month and you send out your bills on the first of the month, everybody is going to get an email that we have an email address on hand for, is going to get that first email. Now keep in mind, Mayor Murray, that as soon as somebody makes a payment, the emails stop. So they won't get additional emails. They pay after the first one, they don't get the second or the third one. But to answer your question directly, Mr. Poole, they go out on the directive of the utility billing department.
Chairman, that can help resolve the problem that you brought up.
Okay.
Reasonable period of time to project somebody forgot to pay and send them another.
And Mayor Murray, just real quick, so the intention of those email notifications are to increase your collections and reduce your delinquencies, and that's really where we came up with 3, and that's where our studies are based, is how many it takes to actually get the attention of your customer and keep your fiscally responsible customers from forgetting making those payments.
Well, I'm looking forward to this in one way and one way not. I do get a lot of questions in the grocery store about why we don't have electronic bill pay, and that usually ends up being an entree point to have a lot of other conversations about what's going on in the community, and I appreciate that. So I'll miss that. So those listening, stop me about something else. But the other thing is that I suspect that we will have a few of the conversations when I get home, and I say, honey, why do we have this water shut-off notice? So hopefully we'll get a little bit better about that ourselves. So, unless there are other questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
a question on the convenience fee. So each resident that chooses to pay their bill online, the city gets charged a convenience fee. So we're not paying you just a lump sum for the year and just anyone can pay online.
Yeah, so the
Correct.
fee will be paid by your citizen. It's a convenience fee, so it'll be paid by them.
Okay.
If they're using a credit card.
You got that right.
Okay.
But what if they're using like an EFT, just a check?
Yeah, so there's a nominal fee for that as well, and
So
to
that goes
facilitate
to the
those.
resident?
That would be paid by the citizen as well.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Now, that does not affect your auto ACHs that you have, that you guys run on a regular basis. Those are not part of that.
Okay, and then back to Mr. Poole's question, so if, let's say we send out the bills on the first of the month, Hank or the staff can choose whether we send out the second notification in the 2-week mark and then the third notification at the 3-week mark.
Yeah, they can decide when those email notifications go out, and then once we set those up during the integration process, then those will go out on those timeframes,
Okay,
and those can be changed if you guys decide at a later date that you want to change those.
okay, and final question, with the kiosk option or online, does Invoice Cloud have the capability of doing other payments rather than just utilities? The presentation that was given before you, some of the grants that we give out, we also give loans, so there are loan payments that have to come in.
Yeah, great question. Yes, we can facilitate a number of different invoice types, whether it's tax, building permits, shelter fees, dog licenses, whatever the city does. I mean, like, as an example, for the city of Boston, we cover everything.
Okay,
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
and then Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, Ms. Lloyd.
It's a question for Hank. So Hank, what would you be looking for us to proceed? Just to proceed with a contract?
If
with
everybody's on
Invoice
board,
Cloud?
I would ask for a motion to at least proceed in this direction with iCloud.
Okay. Then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to proceed with a contract or looking into a contract with Invoice Cloud.
Second.
Been a motion, second, discussion. Contract comes back as by way of legislation for us to approve? Okay.
Yeah, just a question in terms of planning. What did you project was the benefit for this in terms of number of people you expect to take advantage of this?
We've heard.
Justify doing this at
We
all?
would probably get 10% were sign up right off the bat, and ultimately, we've heard about 20% will probably venture into the online world right off the bat, so.
Long-term projection, where do we look, what's our goal? Where we look at, what are we trying to accomplish here? Is 20% enough to justify doing all this? Is that
I
what you
think so. It's been
Okay.
something our customers have been asking frequently, and I know
Purely for the
something,
customers that want it?
Correct.
No
It's-
need to
it's-
get a lot of people,
just
just,
to update, I mean, we're a little
Okay.
bit behind the times, I think, on the technology on that, and you know, we're still, our utility billing is the last piece of a software upgrade that we have to do, and we're kind of going back and forth if we should try to roll this out before we upgrade it or after we upgrade it, and we've had some discussions that now's the time to do it before we make the upgrade on the utility side, so we're excited about it, our staff's excited about it, they're asked every day constantly about when this option is coming, and I think the kiosk is a long-term solution to Ms. Lloyd's question about being able to pay other things, either through the kiosk or even online, so.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I want to circle back to the convenience fee. How is that calculated? How do you determine how much the fee is? Is it the number of people signed up, or how is that calculated?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's, you know, we have an algorithm built to look at, your average monthly bill, and then try to determine based on that where we need to set that fee. It's not really based on the number of people that are going to pay. To Hank's point, we're probably going to get north of 20% using this solution online, but probably even a bigger value for you guys is the fact that we're across our 900 customers nationwide, 20% of their customers go paperless. So you have, I think, right around 10,000 people today, and it's probably safe to say that you'll get 2,000 of them to go paperless. That takes about 22 months to get there. But that's a value that I didn't even cover with you today. And if you can imagine for a moment not having to send out 2,000 bills, what that would cost and what that would likely save the city of Sandusky. But yeah, that's another value add.
Would change over time? Like every year, would it be reevaluated,
Which one?
the convenience fee?
No, not typically. If we saw that there was a really low adoption rate or how many people used it online, then we'd certainly probably circle back after about 6 months and figure out if we missed something. But, we do this really well, in my opinion, and we do it all over the United States. In fact, we just submitted a bid to the city of Cleveland, 900,000 bills a month. And the reason why we're in these conversations is, we typically price our solution really well, meaning fiscally capable, allowing the customers to make that payment. But our technology and our security is really what puts us over the top for cities and municipalities.
Additional questions or comments, Commissioners? There's a motion and a second. Unless there's further conversation, Ms. Cresser, would you call the roll?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That motion passes. All right, we turn to audience participation, and I'm sorry to make so many of you folks wait. I know we thought we were going to be at this a little bit earlier. So let me explain, because I see a lot of new faces in the room tonight. We have audience participation, and that is limited to 3 minutes on any of the agenda items. I recognize and anticipate that a lot of folks are here on the question of the library appeal from the decision by the Landmark Commission, and let me explain how that's going to work. That is an appeal, and it is one where the question that will be posed is, should the commission overrule or overturn or reverse the decision of Landmark Commission? And that's how it's going to be phrased for purposes of the discussion and the vote. As an appeal, it's one where people are free to make arguments, but it's the record is closed and the findings of fact have been made, and there will be no additions to that. So when we get to that point in the evening, I'm going to ask representatives of the library to come up and make their arguments. I understand they're going to do so with several different voices. Not repetitive, but I understand, of course, there may be some overlap in some circumstances. And then after that, the city will state its position, the staff will state its position for why it recommended a denial. Those who are going to speak on behalf of the library at that point in time, you'll have that time later on. And those who wish to speak to the issue now certainly can do so. Mr. Schwanger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way, representing Save Our Shoreline Parks today. I'll be very brief, I promise. The two items for discussion is consent agenda A, item A, and consent agenda item number E. For letter A, I apologize, I missed the last meeting. The question may have been answered, but if we can give a brief answer to my question, that'd be great. Consent item A is the downtown East Bay plan study. Looks like there's a reduction in what the foundations want to pay from $45,000 down to $42,000, with the city picking up the remainder, $3,100, which this was one of those studies that was supposed to be at no cost to the public. So if we can get a detailed answer on that, I'd appreciate it. Consent item number E, letter E, which is the Lions Park retrofit. Going to take it back through a little bit of history. Back in 2011, the city spent $167,000, not all our money, but a conglomerate of money for improvements at Lions Park, and included the removal of concrete debris from the shoreline. In 2012, we spent another $30,000 to crush that debris that was stored up on at that time, the dilapidated parking lot at Lions Park. In 2015, the city applied and received a $175,000 EPA grant for Lions Park to improve water quality at one or more city-owned public beaches. Today, what you're being asked, and I don't know how this got added in, but you're being asked as part of this retrofit consent item E to trash, in my opinion, the shoreline at Lions Park by taking concrete sidewalk and using that as erosion control for future erosion. And we've all had this conversation about erosion at Lions Park. You had discussed, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, there was an email late this afternoon that addressed your concern. That part of the communication was in error, and there is no intent. It was an idea that was put on the table. There is no intent to go back to that stupid practice of putting the crushed sidewalks over the side of the grass and into the water there. So that was just a mistake. Mr. Klein corrected it late in the afternoon, and I think you just didn't catch up with that yet.
Okay, I guess we'll chalk it up to another one of those, misunderstandings or oversights. I'll call it an oversight.
Yeah, well, you were right to catch it, but that was never.
Who thinks of this stuff? I mean, we've had conversations over conversations and conversations about this, and still this gets snuck in somehow.
It was in error.
Okay.
Address item A in the consent
Consent item D, here's another thing I don't understand.
Mr. Struggle, we got 3 minutes and we got a lot of folks on.
Okay, all right, just when you get to this, I don't understand how somebody can put in a concrete pad back in May on Current Street, and it's just now come to this commission for approval as an encroachment. I don't get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak to any of our agenda items? As usual, state your name and address and share with us your thoughts or concerns.
Tim Berkey, 1305 Columbus Avenue. I'm actually wearing two hats this evening in my remarks. The first, on behalf of the Old House Guild, I am the treasurer. We have 7 of our board members here this evening, as well as including our director of the Cook Dorn Museum. Back in spring of last year, our board became aware that there were some water issues with the Johnson House. Our president, Dr. Richard Keller, wrote a letter to the Library Board of Directors offering financial assistance to take care of that issue and support the preservation of that structure. We want to affirm that we, again, offer that to the Library Board. The Library Board did not take us up on that offer. I'm going to take my hat off as a board member and speak as a resident who recently went through an 18-month renovation of an 1800 period house in this city. I've read the reports, the architectural reports that were submitted to the Library Board, and what concerns me is that this doesn't have to be an all or nothing repair or renovation, complete renovation to a building. There's a lot of room in between. When I went through the renovation of our property, we had to make a lot of decisions. Short of $750,000, I would estimate that had I gotten similar estimates on the renovation of my home would probably come in around $500,000. We didn't do that. When it came to plastering, every room, every wall, every ceiling was cracked in that house. We could have spent tens of thousands of dollars in putting up drywall. We decided not to do that and brought an old-fashioned plaster in to repair that work. I'm sad to see that we're in this situation. I know this is a difficult decision for the commissioners, but we ask that you affirm the decision of the Landmark Commission to stick by it because they made the right one. My final remark is that when I look at this, I'm very proud of the work this city has done to take care of its historic buildings. The Library Board, in all of its good work and all of its good intentions, owns this property. But I would submit to all of us that it's actually the city that owns the historical significance of the Johnson House, that we all own that, and we should protect it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berkey.
Good evening. I'm Ed Stout, 1222 Marlborough Street. I am on the board of directors of the Old House Guild. My comments are basically, one, I want to compliment the library on many of the things that they have done to bring our library into the 21st century and make it a very respectable one for the size of our community. When it comes to the Johnson House, though, that is a structure which has not only Ohio, but also a national recognition. It's on the Registry of Historic Buildings. I'm not sure what intent they originally had when they purchased it, but it's still a decent enough structure. It could be turned into something very great. I do know that they are experiencing a financial situation that they don't have the money to do that. The thing is, I was under the understanding that they said their only option that they have left is to tear it down. And I am here to say I think another option would be, like anyone else, if you have something that you cannot take care of, there is the option of selling it. And I know they want to wipe that off the board, but that is a very viable option. And I, again, agree with the Landmark Commission in saying, please preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stout.
Erlene Tursick, 119 Greenbrier Lane, Sandusky. I too am here as an Old House Guild member, but I'd like to read a letter from my daughter Sharon that has prepared. She's a historic preservation professional in our region and more locally a member of the Old House Guild too. And we are both passionate about the preservation of the Godfrey Johnson House. Dear members of the commission, to approve the Library Foundation's appeal and overturn the Landmark Commission's initial ruling to deny demolition would eliminate the possibility of any future dialogue on the subject. And it could also forever tarnish the Follett House and Library Foundation's position as a local historic preservation champions. The Library Foundation has a plan in place for development of the land, but I ask that more thought be given to it because any plan that includes the removal of this home from this site along Columbus Avenue is flawed. From a historic standpoint as well as value to the community, the benefits of preserving the Godfrey House are immense and far-reaching. Any notion that demolition would positively receive is incorrect and incredibly short-sighted. Once it's gone, and we will all we will have left are regrets. Most are familiar with the historic building occupants, Godfrey and Johnson. However, I have another chapter about the occupant who bought the house from Godfrey and sold it to Johnson. The public library in Sandusky could trace its roots back to 1825. Prior to the establishment of the Library Association of Sandusky, known as the Ladies Library Association, there was a Young Men's Christian Library Association, and a man named Lester Latham was its president. Professionally, Latham was secretary and treasurer of the Sandusky, Dayton, Cincinnati Railroad. However, his personal residence was at 1417 Columbus Avenue, a home he had purchased from Godfrey. Latham was a leader in the community, and he was especially focused on further developing a literary institution for Sandusky through a circulating library and reading room, which they eventually established on the third floor of the First National Bank. Unfortunately, Latham's library was not very successful, and some people thought the word Christian in its title led people to believe that all the books were theological, but they were not. In 1870, they offered their 400 books to the 12 ladies who comprised the Library Association so they could be added to their growing collection of books, resulting in the Carnegie Library that we have today. Latham moved and began renting out his Sandusky home then to Johnson, who 2 decades later would purchase it outright from Latham. Architecture aside, the siting of the house right behind the Carnegie Library is a place-making piece of Sandusky history and worth promoting and preserving. The house has direct connections to people and institutions of significance within the community. In today's day and age, technology, we are a society that is less dependent on cars to access information, so parking may not be critical. And if the Godfrey House was built in 1854 and repairs are necessary, maintenance is a financial burden for the library, and if it no longer serves purpose or function to support the mission, then I propose a lot split and sale of the real estate holding. The portion that was critical for the library has already been developed as an access drive, and so sell off the remaining part of the parcel with that stipulation. The library could recoup some or all of their loss while retaining their position as a historic building and steward and advocate. If a reading garden is a desire, consider utilizing part of Washington Park through a partnership with the city. The interior condition is not good. For many historic developers, already modified or dilapidated interiors only provide more opportunity for renovation and upgrade, realizing the benefit from the exterior historic charm while providing like new construction on the interior. Also, as a result of its National Register status, the building has historic tax credit eligibility as part of its potential redevelopment. It just needs someone with the right vision. But before any of that can happen, it needs to avoid the wrecking ball, and it needs your help to do that. So please disapprove the appeal.
Thank you, Ms. Terse. Are those present wishing to address the commission on any of our agenda items?
Nanette Gus, my address is 4280 Jefferson Street, and I'm a member of the Old House Guild and member of the Board of Directors. I was addressing the historic importance of the Johnson House, but not to be redundant, I will skip the part that Erling Turzik talked about Lester Latham. I would like to add about Leonard P. Johnson. Yes, he did purchase the house in 1893, his historical significance in our community. He owned and named Johnson's Island. Johnson and his island played an important role during the Civil War. In 1861, the government leased 40 acres on the island to house Confederate officers as prisoners. The Johnson House is constructed of architectural elements that are found in several periods of time, beginning in 1853. It is a wonderful example for future generations to acquire a sense of how their forefathers lived. As you may know, it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places for the historic reasons. In this bicentennial year, we will reflect upon the history of our city and how we will address our future. Let's not raise part of our past by saving the Johnson House. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guss. Others present wishing to address the commission? Then we will turn to, was someone else getting up? We will turn to our regular items, and I wonder if someone would make a motion to accept the communications from staff.
Second.
Been a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. In hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Item number 4 from our regular agenda is being removed and postponed for consideration another night. I'm told it is not quite in order just yet.
Which one?
Item number 4
On the consent?
on the regular agenda.
Oh, regular. Letters. Okay.
Commissioners, you have before us the several items on our consent agenda. Does anyone wish to have any of those items removed? Then would someone, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm almost going to make the mistake again, but I'm going to get it right this time.
You did, you made the mistake.
I didn't make the mistake. I did not cross that line. I checked my swing, Mr. Brady.
So close.
Mrs. Cresser, would you present the items on the consent agenda?
Send it down to third base and see what, that's a bulk.
On the consent agenda this evening, item A is a second reading regarding an amendment to the funding mechanism for the downtown Sandusky East Bay Plan. Item B is also a second reading. It's a lease agreement amendment with Ron Hilly, doing business as Great Lakes Grinders at Shoreline Park. Item C, a second reading for an amendment to Chapter 145 regarding pay classifications and salary ranges for the administrative employees. Item D is an encroachment agreement for property located at 402 Cove Street. Item E is the Lions Park retrofit project change order. It is a time extension only. Item F is for the disposal of ballistic vests that are beyond their useful life in the Sandusky Fire Department. Item G is authorization to dispose of property through the internet sales for calendar year 2018. Item H is a priority use license agreement with Xavier's Baseball Academy for 2018. Item I is a priority use license agreement with Sandusky Men's Softball League for 2018. Item J is a priority use license agreement with AMVETS Baseball League for 2018. Item K, a priority use license agreement with Sandusky Central Catholic School for 2018. Item L is a priority use license agreement with Sandusky City Schools for 2018. Item M is a LPA agreement for the Columbus Avenue, Scott Street, and Campbell Street project. And item N is an annual cost sharing payment to Erie Soil and Water Conservation District.
Commissioners, having heard these communications, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Lloyd?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions A through N as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions A through N, whether it be in accordance with Section 13 or 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the resolutions and ordinances.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Those resolutions and ordinances are adopted. Now we're going to turn to the item on our agenda that's drawn so much interest tonight, and if the members representing the library would like to step to the podium who are going to present, this would be the time to do so. While you are moving to the podium, let me note, again, these consent agenda items, they're well publicized. There are a lot of folks that get the communications. They're only adopted when there is no objection by any of the commissioners. Otherwise, we take them all off. And it allows us to have more time at these meetings for important discussions like we're having tonight. I'm not sure that we needed all that time on the electronic bill pay, but be that as it may, we turn now to the important item. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Cummings. I'm the Vice President of the Sandusky Library Board and also a member of the Library Foundation. I want to thank you for hearing our appeal of the Landmark Commission's split decision on the demolition of 417 Columbus Avenue. The decision to demolish 417 Columbus Ave has not been easy. We understand the sensitivity of requesting the demolition of the building on a national registry. It has taken the Library Board and the Foundation 18 years of discussion to be here and have the honor, have the city concur in our decision to demolish the property. The library is a public entity with the mission of giving all people opportunities to enrich their lives. The board members are entrusted with the fiduciary responsibility and the burden of being good stewards of public money. The Foundation Board and the Library Board both acknowledge the building does not fit our mission. However, the land does serve a purpose now and in the future for the continued improvement and advancement of our services to the community. The Landmark Commission stated 417 Columbus was on the National Registry. Because it was on the National Registry, it implied the intent to save the building. This is not accurate. While saving the property has been discussed for the last 18 years, the main reason for the purchase was to secure the easements to ensure our patrons could have access to the library parking from Columbus Ave, additional parking, and space for our book drop. We also needed the easement from the Carroll easement. We also needed the easement to eliminate the alley, which is between the library and the jail. We had to get the alley easement from the Carroll House, the Witherspoon House, 417 Columbus, and the church. We needed to eliminate the alley so we could build the connector between the library and the jail. The area is now where the sorting room and the circulation desk is located. The foundation has not requested grants or any other federal, state, or local funding to preserve the property because this would imply our intent to save the building. After many discussions over the years, the building does not meet the litmus test of furthering either the foundation or the library's missions. Therefore, spending additional public money would be irresponsible. While we have saved other buildings, the old county jail, our own Carnegie buildings, and the Follett House Museum, each of these buildings furthered the purpose of our mission. It was also mentioned by the Landmarks Commission, the Foundation and Library Board should review all options, including but not limited to selling the property. We have spent 18 years doing just that. The offer of giving the building to any entity that wants to move the property to a different location has been on the table. We have not had any takers for that offer. There have never been any interest by either board to give up ownership of the land the building sits on. The library must determine where to best use limited funds. Board members of both the library and foundation have spent hours discussing this property. The money and time spent for senior staff to determine how the property could be used for the library is taking them away from more valuable projects that do fit the library mission. After 18 years, there have been no cost-effective or viable proposals to utilize the building for the library or its foundation. In a good faith effort to listen to the opposition of the demolition of the property, the foundation took steps to get an outside estimate to save this property and make it habitable again. The results were shared with representatives of the opposition. The report determined it would require a large amount of capital and future costs to maintain the property. We can debate the actual cost and whether it would be cheaper to do it different ways or with other entities, but extending the discussion beyond 2 decades would be unwise use of the library staff's time and public funds. Being a landlord does not fit either of their board's mission. Doing so in the past with 417 Columbus, while it was habitable, created issues with our 990 tax returns, our 501c3 status, and created additional expenses in addition to outside services were required to perform landlord duties like collecting rent, advertising, vacancies, duties which did not come without cost. The property is now on the stage of draining other resources besides our own. On December 13th, a squatter was discovered living in the upstairs room. Report SPD-17-020613 details that this property has now been added to the community watch list. Unfortunately, with the heroin epidemic ravaging the country and Ohio, we are concerned that an empty house could become a target for others looking for shelter from the elements without having to worry about rent or utilities. This has happened in other empty houses in the county, and the library does not have the resources to provide 24-hour security or to defend against any reoccurrences, nor do we have taxpayers or patrons willing to allow us to extend our fiduciary responsibilities to provide security or renovation of unused real estate. In conclusion, the library and foundation boards will not accept additional public funds or private funds to maintain or refurbish the building. Doing so would give an outside entity control of what we can and cannot do with the property, while also continue to place future financial burdens on the foundation of the library. This does not make financial sense, short-term or long-term, for the library, the foundation, or our patrons. Nor does it make practical sense if the library is to uphold its mission. Because the land itself is valued and does serve a purpose, it has been determined by both boards that the building will remain vacant, and the only viable solution is either demolition or moving the property to another location. Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Tony. And thank you, Commissioners, for this opportunity to address you on the future of our property at 417 Columbus Avenue. It's a very important issue for both the library and the Library Foundation. My name is John Hildebrandt. I'm currently Vice President of the Foundation. I am a native of Cleveland, but I've lived and worked in the Sandusky area since 1974, when I started what would become a 40-year career at Cedar Point. Prior to that, I spent many summers here as my family had a vacation home in the area. So I proudly consider myself half a native. I've had a long-time interest in the history of our community. I'm currently president of the Erie County Historical Society and a trustee of the Sandusky Maritime Museum. I love old stuff. My kids tell me that's because I'm old. Along with fellow Erie County Historical Society trustee Lou Schultz, Maggie Marconi, then administrator of the Follett House, we led the effort to create 3 historic walking tours of downtown Sandusky as part of the city's bicentennial celebration. In the process of creating these tours, we learned a lot about the buildings, homes, churches, stores, hotels, factories, and people that make up the center of our community. They all have great stories to tell. The constant in their stories is change. The city is not colonial Williamsburg. It's not about freezing an era in time. We can't go back to the Sandusky of 1818 or 1863 or 1903 or 1953, or would we want to? So preservation is about choice. And very often the choices are not easy, nor are they popular. What do we preserve and what do we protect? What do we give over to new uses and ultimately to new stories? The effort to provide for the Sandusky Library and Follett House Museum will require all our financial resources, and then some. And certainly from the Foundation's perspective, and I would suggest from the community's perspective as well, the care and preservation of the library and the Follett House are a much higher priority than 417. In closing, I'd like to read from the lead editorial from the November 14th, 2017 Sandusky Register. The editorial talks about the promise of the future for Sandusky. In part, it reads, "The bicentennial celebration next year kicks off soon, and 2018 will end with the opening of a new city hall downtown at Columbus and Washington Row. By then, construction of a new Justice Center will be underway. The city is changing, not only in that physical sense of buildings and businesses, but it's growing and becoming something new, as good as our best memories. I believe the building at 417 Columbus Avenue should become something new." Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn this over to Lee McDermott, who's going to...
Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand.
Thank you, John. Well, I had written good afternoon, but I'm going to say good evening. My name is Lee McDermott. I live at 2408 Deer Path Drive, Sandusky. I'm beginning to think I'm John's evil twin because, like John, I moved here in 1970 and spent close to 40 years practicing law here. And like John, I'm becoming old stuff too. It is my privilege to serve as a member and secretary of the board of directors of the library and as a member and president of the Sandusky Library and Follett House Foundation. My purpose here is to explain to you how we arrived at the position in which we now find ourselves, namely the decision that we have reached the point where the demolition of 417 is our absolute last resort in fulfilling our duty to the foundation and its duty to support the library in its mission of giving all people opportunities to enrich their lives. Before addressing the last resort issue, I must stress three basic points that seem to be the most often cited by those opposed to our decision. First, our intent is not to take down 417 to make room for expansion of our reading garden. Actually, our intent is just the reverse. We have made a difficult determination and it is necessary to demolish the building because the cost of restoration far exceeds any reasonable amount. We are not willing to spend money we do not have to save a building we do not need, all at the expense of other buildings owned by the library, buildings that are of far greater significance and far greater part of our heritage. The expansion of the reading garden is meant solely to lessen the aesthetic effect of removing the building. It's not meant for any other reason. If the city doesn't want that, doesn't want the garden, that's not the issue. Second, at the Landmarks Commission, the vote to approve our request was 3-3. Two of the no votes said the application would be more worthy of consideration after we had demonstrated an effort to sell the building to a person or entity willing to restore and maintain it, something you've heard here tonight. Finding another owner was also mentioned in a communication from a dedicated member of the Old House Guild who has already spoken, who passed along information from her daughter, Sharon Trest. Ms. Trest's comments are already in the record of the Landmarks Commission. They were incorporated by reference. To state our position succinctly, we are not, I repeat, not interested or willing to consider selling the property. At the time the library's project to renovate and expand the magnificent old Carnegie Library and to incorporate and restore the old Erie County Jail, it was determined we needed the property on which the house at 417 sits to provide access and to expand the library's parking. We cannot sell this property without diminishing crucial Columbus Avenue's frontage, access, and parking space. We have offered to give the house to the Old House Guild or to anyone else who would move it to another location. Don't dismiss that offer. I understand that the Cook Dorn House at 1415 Columbus Avenue, which I think of as the home of the Old House Guild, was moved from its original location decades or perhaps even more than a century ago. Third, it has been said we acquired 417. When we acquired it, we assumed the obligation of preserving it. Such is simply not the case. The intention in 2001, we acquired it with the intention in 2001 of demolishing it then. Only when a longtime and loyal benefactor provided the money to shrink the size of the apartment building it had become to accommodate the drive and parking did we go along with the notion of keeping it for residential apartments. In the following years, until 2012, we collected rent and spent money at that time on taxes, insurance, utilities, and an extensive series of repairs, including wiring, plumbing, HVAC, brickwork, chimney work, and a new roof. We decided at that point in 2012, when all these bills were facing us, we decided at that point the building really was not fit for residents, and we did not have the resources to deal with the problems. We realized then that our decision we were faced with would not be a popular one. So we reached out in a number of directions to those we identified as having a concern to explain our situation. Our primary effort was with the Old House Guild because, for obvious reasons.
We respect the work they do. We encourage the work they do. We are preservationists. All you have to do is look at the library, the jail, the Follett House, to understand the work we do in that regard. Finally, in 2015, we were ready to take the difficult step of actually demolishing the building. At that time, our original benefactor asked that we secure a professional estimate of the cost of restoration. This we did by going back to the preservationists and architects who had worked with us to renovate and expand the old library and incorporate the jail. Their estimate came back in a range from $460,000 to just over $1 million to restore the exterior and to gut and reconstruct the inside, reconstruction being deemed more economical. That's where the consideration ceased. That's where the consideration of restoration ceased. It was just too much money to spend. Why have we reached the point of last resort? Together, the library and the foundation own 3 buildings: the expanded Carnegie Library and Jail, the Follett House, and 417. In protecting these properties, we work from a to-do list created for us and prioritized at quite an expense by the same experts we have used to create and preserve what we have. Presently, the total of that list approaches $2 million. $2 million. We simply cannot justify the kind of money it would take to restore 417 and thereby jeopardize the preservation and protection of the true gems. We have been asked what consideration we have given to seeking outside funding. It's almost like being asked, have we done our homework? The short answer is we have not sought such funding. Why not? There are basically 2 reasons, and Tony touched on them. The first is we just do not think the cost of this restoration is justified, especially when we have no use for the property, the building on the property. The second is that with grants come strings, with strings comes control or perceived control by others. Our responsibility is the library and how best to preserve, protect, and improve it. That is precisely what we are doing in making this difficult decision, and we will continue to do just that. Over the last 10 years or so, no less than 30 persons have served either on the library or the foundation boards or in the senior staff management of the library, each one of whom cares deeply about the library and its treasures, each one of whom has taken the same oath you commissioners have taken to uphold the constitutions of the United States and the state of Ohio and to work to the best of their abilities and performance of their duties, each one of whom has faced the difficult question of the future of 417, and each one of whom has agreed at one time or another that the point of last resort has been reached. I have about half a page more in written remarks that I was going to close with, but I'm listening tonight, especially to the comments from the members of the Old House Guild. I'm going to close differently. We believe in preservation, just as they do. We've acted in that regard, just as they have. We have and do work on some of the most significant, historic, architectural, and simply the most beautiful buildings in our city. We're dedicated to that. We make tough decisions. We spend large sums of money every month, every year to keep the gems we have shining. When I listened to the members of the Old House Guild, I was impressed with their sincerity. I share their feeling of preserving our past. But being actively involved in preservation involves a stewardship of what is our heritage and the things that make that up. But part of good stewardship is making tough choices. We can't save everything. So we have to look carefully at what we do choose to save and what we will do with that which we save. It's one thing to undertake a $750,000 to $1 million project to restore, preserve the house at 417 if you have a purpose in mind. What are you going to do with it? Ms. Lloyd has done great work on Water Street, preserving and protecting old structures, but there was a purpose to it. My old law firm undertook the preservation and still does, of the house at 414 Wayne Street. So we all care about the same things. The question is, how do we best serve those things that we care about? And unfortunately, our boards and the members serving on them have decided that it's time that we have to take this step. It hasn't been an easy decision. It hasn't been a quick decision. It hasn't been a cavalier decision. It has been made methodically over the last several years, and that's where we are today. And we would all ask that this commission recognize the number of people that have worked on this problem, the time, effort, and thought they have given it, and respect the difficult decision that has been made. Now, we didn't exactly get voted down at the Landmarks Commission. It was a 3-3 vote on a motion to approve what we wanted. And at least 2 of those votes at least implied that, well, if you just had tried to sell it and had a track record of that, it might be more worthy. So we're not asking that you chop off an historical arm of this city. We're asking that you recognize the difficulty of preserving and protecting what is perhaps more of a gem or gems than that. Thank you. We'll take any questions that you may have if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. I think we'll wait until the city has presented its side.
Okay.
I do want to take a moment to just thank you for the cogent arguments, very well presented, and thank you also for the tremendous work that the Sandusky Library does to distinguish our city from other communities. It's really a great, great institution, and I know that all of you serve without any compensation, and you do it because you love Sandusky and you love the library. And by the same token, the members of the Old House Guild, fairly well presented, cogent arguments as well, a difficult decision that's upon the city. Ms. Sparks, if you could present the staff's position with respect to this, I'd appreciate that.
Should we stay up if there's any questions, or just take our seats?
Why don't Ms. Sparks, how long do you think it will be?
It will not be long, so you can stand.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the commission. I know we had a lot of comment this evening and a lot of presentations, so I will try not to repeat what has already been said. As you know, this is an appeal to the Landmarks Commission. On the screen, you'll see an aerial view of the property as well as what the zoning is. The zoning of the property is general business. And so for those of you at home or in the audience that are not familiar, this is an image of the 417 Columbus Avenue as it sits on the library property. And again, I will try not to repeat anything that has not been said already, but as you know, the application came to our Landmarks Commission on November 15th of this year, or this past year. The Landmarks Commission did deny the application for the certificate of appropriateness to demolish the building. As such, the applicant has submitted for an appeal this evening. The library and the Follett House Museum, as stated, believes it's critical to retain the land that the building sits on for the purposes possibly of expansion, access for parking area, or even possibly a reading garden. The library and the Follett House Museum, as stated again this evening, have 3 properties that are on the National Register, including this building, the library, and the Follett House Museum. Just for some brief history, and again, I will try not to repeat too much, but the building was built in 1854, and it is currently on the National Register. The building is unique Italianate Victorian architecture. It does have a wrought iron porch, which is only one of 2 that are in Sandusky right now. The historical significance, obviously, is in regard to Leonard B. Johnson, who once resided in the building, and his relationship and the ownership of Johnson Island. And again, as it was stated, the library purchased the building in 1999, and in 2001, the property was renovated to include 5 apartments and was rented out And a few years ago, in 2012, the Library Foundation decided the building was not fit for habitation or, at that time, rehab. So the library had provided an estimate in their application for the certificate of appropriateness for the renovations, and that range was around for anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million. So more importantly, from the staffing perspective, we want to reiterate, Sandusky, as you know, has a rich history of historic buildings. We have taken great steps and recently to preserve these historic buildings. Some of these steps including, as you know, we were granted a certified local government status. We have our establishment of our Landmarks Commission. And we recently have expanded the city's historic district to preserve these structures and also to allow for opportunities for economic development within these buildings. The Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation are what the Landmarks Commission uses to review these applications. The purpose of the Secretary of Interior standards is to preserve. It is to preserve the buildings that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, such as this building. The Secretary of Interior standards also states that historic characters of a property shall be retained and preserved, and any removal of these materials or alterations of these features or even these spaces should really try to be avoided at all costs. So this evening, the Commission has the task to uphold or to repeal the Landmarks decision. Again, planning staff would strongly recommend that the Commission uphold the decision of the Landmarks Commission to assist in our preservation of our very, very important historic structures.
Thank you, Ms. Sparks. Ms. McDermott, I don't want to get into a back and forth regarding the arguments themselves, but are there any facts that the staff presented that you believe are incorrect or you'd like to correct?
No, I wouldn't say they were incorrect. And before I depart, I want to thank Casey for the assistance she's provided us in providing records and minutes and everything else. She's been great to work with. I might differ with some of the interpretations that have been read, but I don't think that's what you want to hear about.
I don't think that would be appropriate to get into that. So you've made your arguments very well. You can stand on those. I think they were well heard. Commissioners, we need to get a piece of legislation in front of us so that we can further the conversation. And I've had some conversations with Mr. Harris about this. And what I would like to do, Mr. Harris, if it's all right with you, I'd like to ask for someone to make a motion on item 1A with the understanding that the way this is going to work is that a yes vote is a vote to uphold the decision of the Landmarks Commission not to grant the permit. If that legislation is not adopted, then we would take up item 1B, which would permit the demolition to go forward. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Waddington, would you care to make a motion?
Yes, I would. Mr. Chairman, I move for the adoption of this resolution be passed denying the Sandusky Library and Follett Museum Foundation's appeal of the Sandusky Landmark Commission decision to deny the certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of 417 Columbus Avenue, declaring that this resolution take effect under Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Other than eliminating Mrs. Kresser's job, because I forgot to ask you to read the legislation, questions and comments, discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
to Mr. Hildebrandt, I love old stuff too, so we might have to talk to your kids to see what that means, what that says about me. Maybe, hopefully, it's just an old soul. But you had mentioned City Hall. Everything is changing right now, and City Hall's moving. I'm so proud that City Hall is moving, and it's moving into 3 buildings and helping 3 buildings be rehabilitated. When I talked to the Director of Planning, and she told me that this was coming to Landmarks Commission, I was quite astonished. I appreciate all the work that both boards put in, and the library is a beautiful property and brings so much to our community. And one of the comments that was made earlier was, you're there to enrich the lives of our community. What we want to make sure is that our youth doesn't think that we can just, something's old, let's just tear it down, let's just throw it away. I know you're offering it to be moved, but how well did you market that? Another comment that was made that said spending money was irresponsible. I think it's irresponsible to take down an old building. Mr. McDermott, I appreciate the comments that you made about the work that we've put into the properties that we own. I have to tell you that it was not my intention to come home and come back to Sandusky and end up with 3 properties that own and renovate it and maintain it and working on a 4th property now. Not everything has a purpose right now, but in order to save it and keep the character of our community, we have to find a purpose for it. So right now, I'm working on a property that should open in March that had no purpose. I was sick of seeing it sit there empty, and it was across the street from us, and I just sat there 5 years watching it deteriorate, and nobody did a thing to it. So I may not be financing the project, but we were able to find people to finance it and to make the project go forward and to save that building. So if we need to work like from the city with the Old House Guild, with your foundations and boards, let's find a way and let's find a purpose and let's not move it. As soon as you move it, you take away some of the character. As soon as you move it, you take away some of the history of why it's there to begin with. So I will be supporting to uphold the decision of the Landmarks Commission. And to the Landmarks Commission, those that did vote, yes, I do appreciate you following the National Historic Registry and what their recommendations are.
Additional questions or comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
this is a very difficult decision. I know a lot of heart and passion went on both sides of this decision, to be honest. I don't like having it to come here to have to make a decision, but I will be voting yes to uphold maintaining the property. I don't want to see a historical place like that demolished. I'd like for us to kind of see how we could utilize it. And again, I know there's a lot of heart and passion on both sides of this issue, and it's difficult. It's very difficult. But I do support maintaining this structure and trying to find a use and a way to utilize it.
Additional questions or comments? This is a Rockwell moment. Pat yourselves on the back. If Washington or Columbus could operate this way, having a respectful and civil discussion, the interests of our country would be much more further advanced. Because they're not doing that, we're having these conversations locally and see what happens. It's working pretty well. So you're all to be commended. Someone's going to win this argument. Someone's going to lose this argument. But I expect that it will remain civil. It is a difficult decision. There's no question about it. There are friends of many years on both sides of this issue. And it's for that reason I'm very glad that I can recuse myself, because my wife is on the library board. And I get to punt on this one. So unless there are additional questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Poole.
I did listen carefully to what was said. And this seems to hinge on the belief that on the library board that that this property is critical to your mission in some fashion. I look at it from this perspective. If you're dealing with parking, the current parking lot adjacent to the library, the property to the south of it is owned by the library. You can take that fence down and extend into that parking lot, I would think, since you do own that property. Additionally, when you talked about you didn't really necessarily want to put up a reading garden, and at that part of the conversation, part of the presentation, you didn't talk about parking at all. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm not convinced that that piece of property is all that critical. Addition to that, on Jackson Street, you own an additional empty lot near the corner of Jackson and Jefferson Street. In addition to that, property behind the church on the corner of Jefferson and Columbus Ave It appears that small area is owned also by the library. And I'm just not seeing this, the whatever you think is critical about this property, that it's that critical to the library. More importantly than that, those are just options for you folks to think about in terms of being able to fulfill your mission to the community without tearing this down. I think the community, that piece of property repurposed for something else is much better as a gateway to our downtown as it is than some grass or whatever else, or a parking lot. And that's really where it came down to. It's not just that it's an old building, but I, after listening to you, I disagree that it's critical or that the community is better off with that building coming down and it being replaced with grass, putting grass in that spot or something of that nature. I'd like to point out for your thoughts, perhaps, you folks are a board of people that if you were replaced by 6 other individuals might have come to a different conclusion. And I'd like to see the community come up with a way to spend the money to fix that building up. And if we can't, if we come back that we need to tear it down, then maybe we can. But at this point in time, the city doesn't benefit from tearing it down. That's all I can say.
Mr. Waddington.
My concern is it was purchased, 1999 or 2000, back in that time. Sandusky was different, the downtown was basically dead. Things are turning around, like Ms. Lloyd said, buildings are being repurposed, and I'm hoping maybe someone like an artist, or it doesn't have to be apartments, or maybe a store, a small shop in there, connected maybe to Johnson's Island. It does have historical value, and that's what I'm looking at, and that's why I'm going to definitely be a yes on this, and I just hope it can be repurposed. There's got to be, Sandusky downtown is definitely different than 1999 or 2000. I mean, just look around. And we're going to have City Hall down there, like Ms. Lloyd said, we're going to be redoing them buildings, City Hall. I got to guess that possibly maybe the police department or Justice Center could end up down there somewhere. So that's why I would support this.
Additional questions or comments?
Just one last question, Mr. Chairman. If we do not allow them to tear this down, is it the end of the story if we find that it truly can't be repurposed? Because that's really what we have, new people in the game making a decision that think that there's an alternative. Can this, Mr. Harris?
Mr. Harris, do you know the answer to that question? I believe they do have the right to appeal to the Court of Common Pleas.
They do have a right to it. It wouldn't be an actual appeal per se as an administrative appeal, but they have the right to file a lawsuit and force the city's hand to allow their certificate of appropriateness, which has a different standard. But there would also be time for the city, the Old House Guild, and the library to put our collective heads together to try to figure out a solution that's amicable to all parties involved, if that was the decision of the city commission to potentially save the building.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, without suing us, I'm really asking, is it something that can come back, that we as a community can work toward having a discussion about this? They've had a discussion with the Old House Guild amongst themselves, they say, for 18 years. Must we have this fight? Can we say, look, we're not going to let you do this now. Let's get everybody on board with your belief that it can't be saved.
Through your
And
commission.
come back to us.
Yeah, through your
Without
commission
that, I
president.
don't care, if they sue us, that's their choice, but I'm not looking for an opportunity to fight. I think this is a community, it's best for the community to keep it. And I'm just at this point not convinced that we've exhausted all our possibilities.
Through your commission president to Commissioner Poole, I don't know offhand the time frame. I believe it's a year, but I think they could come back and file a certificate. I'm not sure. I can't answer that question, but I can get that information to everybody.
You're suggesting that outside of litigation context, there is an opportunity still to proceed along the lines that Mr. Poole was suggesting, is that if it's not
Come back
approved
and-
tonight,
yeah.
to take another look at it with different circumstances.
Correct.
Ms. Lloyd, did you?
I would just like to say, I think with all the comments from behind the table here, it seems as if everyone's looking, we should look at this as an opportunity instead of just saying no to the library, like, let's work together and figure something out.
Additional questions or comments? Ms. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the resolution?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted and the appeal, or the commission, the decision of the Landmark Commission is sustained.
May we be excused?
You may be.
Thank you.
And thank you again for the presentation tonight. We look forward to further conversations with the library.
I hope we can.
Mrs. Cresser, would you present item number 2, please?
Item number 2 is an ordinance authorizing and approving a grant in the amount of $15,000 through the Small Business Assistance Grant Program to BSL Holdings Limited in relation to the property located at 1517 Fifth Street, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. It's all talked out.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I've lost my train of thought.
Mr. Chairman, I think Ms. Muratori is ready to give a presentation.
I think Mr. Murtaugh is going to give a presentation.
Yeah, yes.
Honestly, what I was
Do you have
thinking,
that train of thought, or did you come to that late?
the train left the station. What I was thinking about was Mr. Waldock has been standing now for an hour and 35 minutes. And it is my understanding that this legislation is going to create or save 29 jobs in this city. I am willing to, I should have gotten up and given him my chair an hour and 35 minutes ago.
You know, we would all like that.
I will
Would
do
you like
that.
to come
I
up
will
here
do
and
that
take
for
this job?
29 jobs in this city. Thank you, Mr. Wallach, for refreshing my memory.
Ms. Muratori, I'm sorry I did not see you at the podium.
I would just quickly like to review the grant recommendation. We will be considering a request from BSL Holdings, which is solely owned by Mr. Robert Waldock, who is in the audience tonight. BSL is the owner of the 32,000 square foot warehouse and office located at 1517 Fifth Street. This property has been renovated and improved from a brownfield site, and it currently provides space for boat storage and Homebrew Ohio. The space pictured is where AVI Food Systems will be located. AVI Food Systems is relocating from another location within Sandusky as its lease expired and its landlord is not renewing its lease. We estimate that AVI employs approximately 29 people. We think it's important to retain this business within the city and obviously the corresponding income taxes associated with the employees. We worked with Mr. Waldock and Ecadec to find a solution for AVI in a timely fashion. This all transpired pretty quickly, so it was good that we had an ability to act. According to Abby from Ecadec, if this space didn't work, AVI may have relocated not only out of the city, but likely out of the county. This grant is a motivating factor for the completion of the project. These are just some pictures of other spaces within the property at 1517 Fifth Street. And then just to review the funding sources and uses for the project, the portion of the project that we will assist with includes improvements to the loading docks so that multiple tenants can utilize the loading dock, installation of a dividing wall, electrical upgrades, and installation of a new entrance. The total project costs approximately $30,000, almost $30,000. And this doesn't include an additional $30,000 of other improvements that the property owner will make and build into the rent over a period of time. The Economic Development Incentive Committee approved a $15,000 small business assistance grant at its January 9th, 2018 meeting. That's approximately 50% of the project cost, and it will leverage private funds 2 times. Per our grant agreement, the project will be completed no later than April 30th, 2018. That is all, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montori. Questions or comments, commissioners? Mr. Waddington.
That building's 32,000 square foot, and I live on McKinley, around the corner, wrap around kinda. I'm glad to see something going in there, there'll be some activity, because it'll help as far as safety in that area, you know. Just having people around instead of a dead zone. It's kind of been empty since, what, DCI left?
It's been intermittently rented
Okay.
through different people over the last 5 years.
But this sounds like it's gonna be, pretty good, pretty hopping, so, thank you.
Yeah, pretty big difference between storage
Yeah.
and having 29 people work there.
Right.
And the activity, that's a real big difference.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
Ms. Murtori, this project dramatically increases your batting average as far as cost per job, I would say. Would you agree? We're retaining 29 jobs at about $500 a job.
Yes.
And if I recall our earlier presentation, which I was not sleeping through, we talked about a job creation costing us between $16,000 to $25,000.
Actually, for 2016 and 2017, on average, it was about $6,000, and that was in comparison to the legacy program that we utilized much more historically, the revolving loan fund, which required about 1 job per $25,000.
Much bigger number. So this is a no-brainer. This is a terrific opportunity for our city to spend $15,000 and truly leverage that into 29 full-time jobs. Great opportunity for us.
Additional questions or comments? I know you've been passionate, Mr. Waldock, about cleaning up this property. It's been a very long-term effort, and you've been a great partner to that neighborhood, so thank you for that. Commissioners, I guess, Mrs. Kresser, time to call the roll.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 3, please.
Item 3 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase playground equipment and associated surfacing from David Williams and Associates Game Time of Alliance, Ohio for Central Park, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Waldock. I mean,
He lost his train of thought.
yeah, I know, but you should stay with that, but go ahead. Mr. Waddington.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second discussion. In my defense, I will note that both names begin with a W. Can't explain it otherwise. It's the only defense I can offer.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I
Waddington.
attended these meetings at Central Park. I believe Mr. Peters does a couple of them there too. And I know the neighbors, majority of them love the idea that we're doing something, enhancing that park there. It's kind of like in the center of town, so I think this is going to be great.
Additional questions or comments? It's a great example of public engagement, getting out there, getting the input from the community, the neighbors before we proceed. So I think that worked out really well too.
Mr. Chairman, just to be, I'm not even sure why. I'm glad we're doing the park. I'm not jumping on board with it's gonna be great because I haven't seen the layout. I say that tongue in cheek. I just want to clarify that though. It's like, I ain't seen what he's doing, but I'm glad we're upgrading.
Okay, yeah. Additional questions or comments? Tongue in cheek or not? Okay, Mrs. Kretzer, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 4 has been passed over and set aside for another week. And item number 5, please.
Item 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a contract with Underground Utilities Incorporated of Monroeville, Ohio, for the Gartland Avenue reconstruction project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Well, Mr. Klein, it's good to get this finally here. It's an expensive project, but your communication explains very well why it's so expensive. And I know the residents are looking forward to it, and Mr. Waddington and Mr. Brady, we were at a coffee on Saturday, and one of the residents came, and just real kudos to the communications between the city and the residents. They really appreciate the way you've kept them in touch and let them know what the progress is. So unless there are questions or comments, Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 6, please.
Item 6 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed demolition and asbestos abatement of 1702 Campbell Street, and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine?
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
It's been a motion and second. Discussion. Well, the old House Guild isn't here to support this one. As well they shouldn't be. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Controversial, I guess.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the resolution?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Item number 7, please.
Item 7 is a resolution in support of the landing project and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
And a motion and second. Discussion. We had a very long presentation about this at a recent meeting, and it was really excellent, so I don't know that the commission's in any real rush to repeat all that tonight. So unless there are questions or comments, Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
And now on the resolution?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Item number 8, please.
Item 8 is an ordinance amending Part 1 Administrative Code, Title 9 Taxation, Chapter 192 Income Tax, specifically Sections 192.02, .04, .05, .07, and 192.18 of the codified ordinances in the manner and way specifically set forth herein below, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Stowaway, could you walk us through what we're doing here?
Yeah, basically what we have is some language change in our income tax ordinance. As you might recall, the state had sort of mandated all the municipalities get on the same page as far as their income tax ordinances. And unfortunately, if there's changes made at the state level, which there was when the governor signed the House Bill 49, it impacts our ordinance. So basically, it's language change to get it in compliance with what the state had approved.
And I think you'd spoken to this before, but this has a negative impact on the amount of income taxes that we can collect.
Yes.
And I think you had ballparked what that would be. I realize it's only an estimate because it depends upon a lot of different factors, but could you remind us of what that was?
I don't remember what we had talked about as far as an estimate. I know one of the issues where a lot of our businesses are already using the Ohio Gateway, which is sort of the big topic right now with government income taxes and businesses. So we already had businesses using it. What we're concerned about is now with that filing, it goes to the state, so we're concerned the timeliness of how the state will now distribute those funds to us, whereas before, those payments came through Rita. So we're a little concerned, don't really have the answer to that question as far as the timeliness of those receipts coming in, but pretty much what's presented tonight is just language update to be in compliance with the House bill.
And Mr. Harris, I would just as soon tell the state to go pound salt when it comes to things like this, but I assume this is a legal requirement and we don't really have any choice.
Correct.
And what happens if we don't pass it?
Well, a lot of things can possibly happen. I know that there are some.
Name like one bad one.
They won't trickle down the money to us.
Oh, that's a good one. That's all I need to hear. The unfortunate, Ms. Fuller, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just got caught up in the language. Could you give a brief talk about what exactly is going to occur? Because you said two different things. One, that we're going to lose money, and then the conversation switched to you're not sure we're going to get it in a timely fashion. So what does this law make happen?
Well, that happened already previously with the budget bill that was passed by the state when we did the first revision. This was a while ago. I don't know if you remember, it was a year or two ago when we updated the chapter. We created the different. So if you look at our charter or our administrative code right now, we actually have two income tax ordinances. One is for periods beginning after 1/1/2017, I believe, and then all years prior to, we still follow the old one. Well, the new ordinance basically, or the new income tax provisions, and this is statewide, it's not just Sandusky, allows businesses to file through the state. So when they file their income taxes, it goes through the Ohio Business Gateway, which means the state then collects the money. Really not a lot of procedures that are defined as to how long they can hold that money, how it's gonna be distributed. So that's still part of what we're changing here, like there's no change to that. So that's why I'm, as Mr. Murray alluded to, there's really nothing we can do. The state sort of jumped in and kind of mandated how to do it. So absent that, what this is, when they signed the House bill this past summer, the legislature made changes to the municipal income tax ordinance, which then has a trickle-down effect. Basically, all municipalities have to go through this process and update their language to be in compliance with the changes they made. Are they major changes? Not really. A lot of it's date changes, word changes, kind of, minor language changes. I don't think the legislation here per se costs anything, but it doesn't change what the state has already done.
Mr. Chairman, this is more for the public to understand what you're talking about. Essentially then, businesses are now going to pay through the state, and the state will give us the money? And that's really what that's really what this happens?
Well, that's what happened
Okay.
already.
And
So,
potentially,
yeah.
we may get less money because why? Or
Fee.
because the state's taking a fee?
Correct.
Okay, that's really what I wanted you to say for the public, because I've read the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Harris.
And through you, Chair, to Commissioner Poole and the rest of the commission, just so you guys are aware, entities like RITA are reaching out to communities and municipalities. We're not one that has signed up, but I believe that there will be litigation between municipality and the state on the horizon that will iron out whether this is appropriate or not appropriate. But I think we should take a sideline approach at this time.
Always good when lawyers get paid, but it's better if somebody else is paying them, so that's good. Okay. Further questions or comments? There is a cost associated with this because we do have to publish the ordinance. Our charter requires that we publish the entirety of the ordinance, and I'm not sure that's the wisest expenditure of city funds, but that's what we have to do. So, Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Now on the ordinance?
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. And we turn now to Mr. Wobser for your city manager's report.
Thank you, Commission President, Commissioners, audience, and staff. I want to start my manager report this evening by welcoming a new city employee, Tondra Frisbee, who's our new youth program supervisor, is here. I've had a chance to get to know Tondra over the last nearly 2 years through her work at the Nehemiah Center, having been introduced to that by members of the community, and saw what special work she was doing with youth there. And ultimately, her becoming available happened to take place right at the same time where we were looking seriously at how to implement the bicentennial vision component about engaging youth in the community through recreation programming, both in the summer and then ultimately doing more in the school year. And it really was a perfect fit. Victoria and Jason oversaw the search process, but I was thrilled when Tondra applied and is joining us today. So Tondra's in the audience. And thank you so much for becoming part of the city.
Enhancing what's already in place and creating some really good special for you.
Well, we really look forward to the energy that you bring to everything that you do, so welcome aboard.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the donations. First, a very generous donation from one of our commissioners, a $600 donation from Commissioner Waddington, and he wanted to specifically set that aside for the new Public and Cultural Art and Acquisition Fund that the commission voted in the last meeting. So I'd ask for a motion to accept Commissioner Waddington's donation.
So moved.
Second.
And a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, Mr. Waddington, with our thanks, the motion is approved.
Thank you. Also, a $100 donation received from Nanette Goss for a future security system at the cemetery. I'd ask for a motion to approve that donation.
So moved.
Second.
And a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks to Ms. Goss.
Thank you. Moving on to the administration, the following persons have been appointed to serve as volunteers on a respective board and commission. I will read each of those. CRA Housing Council, Drew Meredith. The Tax Incentive Review Council, Joanne Bonner, Andrew Meredith. Economic Development Incentive Committee, Abby Bemis. The Erie County Board of Health, Dr. Richard Keller. The Fire Prevention Code Board of Appeals, Dan Fresh. The Housing Appeals Board, Gary Gundelsberger, and Mike Meinzer as an alternate. The Income Tax Board of Review, Carrie May, and the Residential Building Code Board of Appeals, John Fike. Could we ask for a motion to approve those?
Second.
Got a motion and second discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The appointments are made.
Thank you. Also, the Erie County Veterans Memorial Park Committee is partnering with the Friends of the Greenhouse to request a grant from the Erie County Community Foundation and possibly one other local foundation for Veterans Park. The project would entail the purchase and installation of a Gold Star Family Memorial in the park. Gold Star Memorials honor families who have sacrificed a loved one who gave their life to protect our freedom and to give freedom to many who have not experienced it. If their grant request is successful, the money would be used for the purchase and installation of a concrete foundation, curb and slab, brick pavers, monument, and base. The city's Horticultural Services Greenhouse Division would take care of all the plantings and landscaping in kind. Also, John Fike of the Fike Design Group, a member of the Erie County Veterans Park Committee, is also donating in kind all the architectural design work for the project. If funded and when complete, the materials would be formally gifted to the city of Sandusky through the city commission. Also, Toff's Dairy created an ice cream last week named Bicentennial Butterscotch Toffee in partnership with the Bicentennial Commission. This flavor will be in their parlor, and we're extremely grateful for their partnership and excitement for the year. We did have a chance to taste some in the office last Friday. I might have jumped the gun and tasted it shortly before.
Never leave the cake out around Mr.
One spoon. We did come up with a fun tall tale to try to make up a historical significance of butterscotch at a staff meeting. Butterscotch Bay as a historical nickname. that when the Irish came over to Sandusky, first settled in Sandusky, that they saw it was brown water, and they knew they had to sell that for more Irish to come. And so the earliest Murrays here, well, no, just kidding, came up with the idea of calling it the Butterscotch Bay as a way to dramatize the brown water. I don't know if that was very good or not, but I was proud of it in the moment. We're going to have Joey Castle make a video.
Probably had to be there.
And see if we can sell it. No, I'm just
Probably had
kidding.
to be there.
It was, I will say after 5 for purposes of this. Also, sticking with the Bicentennial Ball is officially sold out. A waiting list is being offered by the State Theater and a phone call to the State Theater, which I should have a number, but I don't now, is the best way to get on it. Also, numerous history programs are being offered in the upcoming weeks. Tomorrow, January 23rd, Prohibition in Ohio is being offered at the Sandusky Library. Saturday, February 3rd, the Underground Railroad conductor, John Parker, is being reenacted at the Sandusky Library. And on Tuesday, February 7th, bicentennial banter with the Sandusky NAACP at the Sandusky State Theater. Moving on to the police department, in lieu of Commissioner Waddington's advocacy for Karen Share, it was determined that officers of the department that wanted to continue to have beards or facial hair for the month of February would be permitted to have facial hair with a donation to this organization. A donation to Karen Share has been given to Commissioner Waddington for this cause. This will be the last month of facial hair until November 2018.
Okay, Mr. Whoopser, I just wanted to interrupt you for a second. We do have from Chief Orzak funds in the total amount of $505. So we thank you to all the officers for that generous contribution at a point in time when these folks really need it.
Great, thank you for that. The police department also participated in the Parent Summit at Sandusky High School. I also saw the fire department represented there as well on January 20th from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. Moving on to finance, the next scheduled finance committee meeting is Friday, February 23rd at 7:45 a.m. in the commission chambers. Moving on to Public Works, the Division of Engineering is applying for a grant for the first phase of work to be done for the Landing Park project located north of Cedar Point Sports Center. The grant application is due the first week of February. Stay tuned for more information about this opportunity. The Division of Water Distribution has purchased new drinking fountains to replace old fountains in several locations, as well as to be installed in a few new locations throughout the city. Also, we'd like to welcome Curtis Lofties as a full-time employee in the Division of Water Distribution. And finally, the consultant for the West End Utility and Connectivity Project plans to initiate field and drone surveys this week and may be in the field for several weeks. Please be careful when driving and do not remove their stakes. Moving on to community development, the city is currently accepting requests for qualifications for multiple projects related to the new City Hall administrative facility. These requests are related to seeking qualified signage design and fabrication companies to undertake the design, fabrication, and installation of exterior and interior signage, seeking qualified commercial moving companies to provide commercial moving services to move office furniture intended to be brought to the new facility, and seeking qualified office furniture suppliers to undertake the design, consultation, purchase, delivery, and installation of a limited amount of new office furniture. Moving on to the planning department, the regular planning commission meeting scheduled for Wednesday, January 24th has been canceled, and the regular Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for February 15th at 4:30 p.m. in the first floor will take place in the first floor conference room, and that is a Thursday. And that concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whoopser. Commissioners, questions or comments for Mr. Whoopser? If not, then are there any items of old business? Any items of new business? There are 2 vacancies. Well, first, I need to request a motion to set a public hearing for Monday, February 26th at 5 p.m. regarding the CDBG Annual Action Plan for 2018. Would someone care to make that motion? A motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved. We do have a vacancy on the ADA Fair Housing Board, and there is an applicant, Brian Stanley, who is an architect and well-skilled and able to provide the ADA Board with some practical, on-the-ground advice, and wondering if we might be able to garner a motion to appoint him to the board.
Second.
And a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. We have a vacancy on the rec board, and Bernie Seiler, a longtime coach in the Sandusky City Schools, city resident, has applied And I wonder if someone might care to make a motion to appoint him to that.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Other items of new business? If not, then we will turn to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address the commission on any items related to city business, please step to the microphone, give us your name and address, and share with us any thoughts that you may have.
Catherine Carter, 5309 Columbus Avenue. With regard to the house that they want to tear down in Columbus, it just sounds to me like they didn't want it in the first place, or they would have charged enough rent to keep the building up for all these years. I hope you can find someone in this country that could come in here and make a beautiful bed and breakfast out of that. We're vacation land. You ought to be able to rent that out easy. Back to the Art Commission that we were talking about the last meeting. You voted to put some money aside to have a firm come in and teach you how to create a commission and tell you where to stick your art. I just wanted to suggest something that would be the cost of some coffee and cookies that you could try before you got into that. In this room for 2 hours, invite every art and design teacher from every high school in this county to come here to discuss how to bring art into Sandusky. Coffee, cookies, you talk for 2 hours, and then the next week have them come back and see what they've come up with. That won't cost you anything. All those people have an art background, and it might give some direction to where you want to go when you start talking to someone who's going to charge you a lot of money to take their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Anyone else wishing to address the commission? If not, then the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. And adjourn.